Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Andy Roark, and this is the Uncharted Podcast. Guys, I'm here today with Maria Pirita, and we are talking about practice managers that do not have any medical experience. How can that be? That's got to be a terrible idea, right? That has got to be an unwinnable situation for the manager and the practice, correct? Yeah, maybe not. Let's talk more about that in this episode.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and my dear friend, the one and only Maria Pirita. How are you?
I'm good, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It is absolutely beautiful here in South Carolina as we record this. The kids are wrapping up school. We're in that just garbage part of the school year where they're half day in it, and I'm like, This is ridiculous. They're 100% meeting quotas that were set for how many days they have to meet. They gave their Chromebooks back a week and a half ago, and that's when all work actually stopped. And
Back in my day, we didn't even have Chromebooks.
Oh, I know. It was nothing like that. But I mean, I will tell you, if you wonder, are kids dependent on laptops now at school? Well, they are at our school, because when you took them away, everything just stopped. It was done.
Well, for good reason. School did teach me how to type very fast, so.
Yeah?
I ended up taking, one of the best courses I took in high school was a computer keyboarding class. And now, 90 words per minute. Let's go.
Heck yeah.
So there's benefits, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I remember those times as a kid of school is ending. There's just excitement in the air. Everybody's fired up. There might be some exams, but in younger, elementary, middle, even into high school, there was just this real enthusiasm of, wow, this chapter is ending and another one opens up. And that was when I was young enough that the next chapter was really exciting. Now the next chapter is always sad. It's always and now I'm too old to eat pizza without Tums.
Well, you have to create your own excitement. For us, every time we're on vacation, we have a goal that we have to have our next one decided and planned. So by the time that we end, we just got back from vacation. It was beautiful time in Japan. But by the time that ended, we were like, all right, where's our next one going to be? So it's not going to be for over a year and a half from right now. But Africa, here we come. We already knew, and now we're excited. So you just got to create your next thing to always be looking forward to, your summer, I guess, your next grade.
No, I think that's true. There's something big about. I think everyone should have something they're looking forward to. I think I need to figure out what that is. Also, it must be nice to be married to an airline pilot. I'll tell you that. That's big subtle
perk.
Flex by Maria. Leaving Japan, I was thinking, what about Africa? And my husband's like, sure.
And my husband's like, why not?
Why not?
You're right. I take it back. I said that one of the best decisions I ever made was taking computer keyboarding, and you just made me realize, actually, no, it was picking a husband that is a pilot and flies me around the world. So you're right. I
don't think anyone thought at the list of good things you did in your life, computer keyboarding was 100% number one.
I don't know. It is it's our goals. We love to travel, and we don't have kids, and this is our thing that we put on our Christmas card all the time.
Live it up. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty. You get out there and travel.
And travel we are. So it's
good. Yeah. So we got a mailbag question. It was the shortest mailbag question in the history of mailbag questions. It was non-medically trained practice manager ? And that was the mailbag question.
Yeah.
That we got.
I thought it was great. I think it's great.
Very to the point.
What I thought was the funniest, and so I think I've mentioned this before I started working at Uncharted, I was a big listener of this podcast. It was the best way for me to start work. Is I would have an hour commute, and I would have Andy and Stephanie giving me great advice right before work, and so I loved it. And I'm pretty sure we've covered this topic before, and I'm pretty sure when I was listening to the podcast episode, I was like, I have thoughts on this, and I never once thought that I was going to be able to talk about it, and now here we are. So I'm really glad somebody submitted this in for 2 reasons.
I have to go back and look and see if it came from Maria Pirita at unchartedvet.com.
It did not, but I was one of those practice managers that was not quite medically trained, so it might as well have come from me, but it did not. I promise you that.
How much experience did you have with vet medicine when you started managing hospitals?
When I started managing, I had about 3 years of experience in veterinary medicine. But when I started in vet med,
at the front desk, right?
At the front desk, and I was cross-trained as a veterinary assistant, but only in the most bare bones possible way. So like, gotcha. I could check in rooms, take vitals, do history, fill prescriptions, that kind of thing. But like, I drew blood all of 3 times, successfully all 3.
Yeah.
But I was not the go-to blood person because I did not do it very often. So it was definitely a struggle, which is actually why I was so excited to do this podcast in general. When the mailbag came in, I was like, not only am I excited because I'm pretty sure I've listened to this before on the podcast and had thoughts, but 2, I also thought it was really cool. How cool, Andy, for a moment, just hold the trophy for me that you have had such a successful podcast that people are still, like, new listeners are still coming on board and being like, I need help with this, even though it might be a topic that you have covered before, and that it's still growing in listenership, that people, this is still an issue for a lot of clinics, like this is still, so like some of the things that we see in veterinary medicine, we laugh a lot about because they're all very similar challenges to other industries, but really it's leadership and management that it comes down to. And so anyway, those are the main reasons why I'm excited for this episode. But it's gonna be
I think there's a good one. When I started thinking about non-medical practice managers, right? So I think for Headspace, for me, I think there's important context here in vet medicine right now. And so vet medicine right now is going through a period that I'm starting to call the operations revolution. And so what that means is this. So when you look at a veterinary business, there's really 2 different driving forces. There's medicine and there's operations. And medicine is deciding what is patient care, what drugs do we use, how do we talk to clients, what is our medical record system, all of those things around patient care and client experience. That's medicine. And operations is very much the business side. It's the logistic. It's scheduling, not what happens in the appointment. It is staffing. It is what does compensation look like for the staff? What does inventory management look like? All those things are operations. Historically, veterinary medicine has been dominated by the medicine side, almost comically so. When I started in the profession, like back in 2000, 2003, 2004, something like that, almost all of the hospitals were owned by veterinarians. And the classic sort of stereotype of the veterinarians were they were terrible with money. They didn't want to talk money, they didn't want to talk about revenue. That was not what they were trying to do. It was the big management advice at the time was don't let the doctors set the prices. Don't let them communicate the prices because they'll give everything away. And that was not bad advice at the time.
That was true in my clinic. So.
That's really what it was. And so you've got this vet that was like giving everything away because they, driven by accessibility to care was their driving factor. And there was just not that much of a profit focus, not anything like what we have today. And so that's why I said the operations revolution is as you've seen outside forces come in, private equity investors, just corporatization in general, people have gotten a lot more serious about what are your costs of goods sold, what is your baseline revenue, what is your number of pet visits, how do we run more efficiently. And right now we're really seeing this back and forth between medicine and operations. And so if you ever go to a practice and you feel like it feels sort of very much focused on the numbers and the bottom line or, on efficiency, and you feel like the medicine or the patient care is an afterthought to how do we get these things done, that's a place where operations has gotten too much control. And if you ever go to a place where we all care about the animals, but things are wildly inefficient, we don't have good protocols, we don't have standard operating procedures, we give stuff away, nobody knows what the budget is, we're running out of things constantly, that's a place where medicine has clearly dominated and operations is way underserved or undersupported. And so anyway, but we're seeing a lot of that now. The idea that there's a problem, I think from a headspace standpoint, that there's a problem with a manager who doesn't have much training or experience with medicine, I think that's a holdover from old school vet medicine, where it was like all of our managers came up, they were assistants and they were techs and then they were managers. Yeah. And so, in every other industry, having someone who's trained in management coming into the industry, that's not remotely unusual. But in vet medicine, I think we still feel like it is. And I don't know that that's warranted.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. For me, it's very relatable because it's how I started in veterinary medicine. And I agree with you. I think in my experience, I had about 10 years of experience in management and leadership in food and service industries. And I actually think that really helped me grow in my practice management. And I will,
no doubt.
I'm happy to tell the audience that and when I was a practice manager, we grew that clinic from a single doctor, practice to all the way 3 doctors. We were, we more than tripled our revenue coming in. And it was because a lot of the things that I brought in were from an operation standpoint. But you are right that historically, most of the practice managers that were my friends at the time, they were RVTs and LVTs. And I think it's interesting because I feel what this person that submitted the mailbag feels a little bit, in the sense that I was always pretty self-conscious about the fact that I did not have as big of a medical background. But what I'm trying to say is it did feel somewhat give me a little bit of an imposter syndrome to be I don't know how to, place a catheter, and I can't teach somebody that. But it also forced me to lean into my medical director and build them up and grow them up in a way where they were the ones training the people and showing them. And so I think that there's no right or wrong here. It's not completely wrong for your medical, for your practice manager to be fully medically trained. It's also not wrong for them to not be. It's just a matter of how you end up running your business. But I do agree with you. I don't think this is necessarily a problem. It's more of a situation. No. And so that's kind of how I lean into it.
Well, it depends on the context. I think you're spot on.
Totally.
I really love where your head is here. Honestly, guys, one of the biggest problems that I think you and I see when we work with hospital groups is oftentimes there's a struggle to define what the heck does the medical director do? And the truth is, well, the manager should be managing and running sort of the operations part of the business, and your medical director should be making your medical decisions or leading doctors to come to consensus on the medical decisions of what we're going to do. And then also, that's where your lead veterinary technician comes in. That's what that job is. And so really what I would say is you can be a wonderfully effective practice manager who comes in, who works collaboratively with your medical director and your lead vet tech. And I think you can just do incredible work there. I think the other part of this I want to sort of lay out is there's this old school ideal as well, that in order to be able to lead someone, you must be better technically at the thing than they are. You know what I mean?
I definitely feel that. Yeah.
The most basic version of it is veterinarians should be better at drawing blood than technicians are. And there's people who believe that.
I don't agree with it, but I feel it. I've felt it in the industry. Yeah.
My technicians draw all the blood. And
so 100%.
They have way more reps than I do. And I'm okay with that. And there's some doctors that are really bothered by that. And I'm like, buddy, I am all about effective delegation, working collaboratively as a team. If I ever had to start over and it was just me, I can hit a vein. And if I had to hit veins and I did it multiple times a day, after 2 weeks, I'd be pretty good. I would be back where I needed to be. But that's not the world I live in right now. Yeah. And so, I have no problem with the fact that technicians are much better at venipuncture than I am. That's okay. I don't have to be able to tape a catheter in to supervise the techs putting catheters in. That doesn't. Yeah. I got it. I got the basics of it. I can recognize when things are going wildly off the rails. And so anyway, I think all of that sort of mentality of medicine as the driving force and managers should come through medicine. I think that's sort of an outdated way of thinking into the not distant past, but honestly, just in the last 5 years or so, I think things have really started to shift away from that. And the idea that, your manager has to have more medical insight than the person they lead. I would say if their job is to set medical protocols, then they do need more insight than the people they're leading. But if their job is to collaborate with a designated medical director or a designated lead veterinary technician and to get those projects done, then I would say, give me a manager that's got good project management skills. Give me a manager who knows how to be organized and get things done. Give me a manager that's a good communicator and can actually just hold people accountable and who's there to help set deadlines and, and to set priorities of what are we going to do first and when is it going to be done. And to help drive follow-up to make sure that things that don't fall off the rails. I think that that's really what we're looking for.
And let's not forget that all of those things take time. So
Yes.
a lot of times we look at this situation as, well, if we had a practice manager that was medically trained, they could fill on the floor, they can teach people how to do those things. I already talked about the fact that, if they're teaching it's robbing an opportunity from your technician, your lead tech, your medical directors. But the other thing is that a lot of those friends of mine that were RVTs or LVTs, when we would talk about leading teams and I would, talk to them about having one-on-ones or doing medical audits and things like that, or doing the accountability piece, the team meetings, it'd be like, where do you have the time for that? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's just part of my admin time. And they literally could not get off the floor because they were trained as medically.
Yeah.
So the team was constantly
like
using them as a crutch. And they had no time to do the one-on-ones, and they weren't empowering their people because, again, they were the crutch. They were always the hero, when in reality, a good leader, a good manager is going to make their teammates the hero, right? Lift them up to be able to draw the blood, to do the catheters and all of those places. And it could really rob them of that opportunity when we try to step into that role. And I will just remind the audience one time that as a certified veterinary practice manager, none of the exam questions were about medical topics for my CVPM exam.
That's a great
So
point.
when we've got a certified veterinary practice management program, like literally there's not anything medical in there. It's all finance, marketing, law, HR, all of those things are super important in your practice. And you need somebody to be taking care of those. They're not going to be able to take care of those things if they're constantly covering the floor or filling in where needed or having to be the primary trainer of everyone in the clinic. So
Where do you think not having a medical background makes life harder for practice managers coming in?
I think that's exactly where is not having medical background becomes hard when you're short-staffed. So that's why I was wondering if maybe that's part of my headspace is find out why this really feels like a problem. Because if it's really that they can't fill in when you're short-staffed, then that's not your problem. Your problem is you're short-staffed all the time, and you need to figure that out. The other barrier is when you're trying to train people. So like, say I wanted to train somebody on how to place a catheter, but I myself don't know how to place a catheter. Well, that becomes a barrier as well. So I think that's why I lean on those two is like really being the potential the problem. I'm sure there's a lot of nuance here and there's a lot of things that we don't know because it was just a 5-word mailbag. But it really, I think that's the biggest part of my headspace is figure out what, and this is sometimes where the 5-fold why comes in handy. And we can talk about it in action steps, but like, why is this such a problem at your practice?
I think the one for me is it does make trust building harder with the team, especially when you're coming in. If the team doesn't, if they don't know you, and also you don't have a background in medicine, I suspect that again, it's going to vary with the individuals, but I suspect that there are teams that are going to be a little bit more wary about you. And they're going to say, is this person, are they not going to let us do the things that we want to do? Or are they not going to understand why providing care in this way is important? Or are they going to try to make this practice all about money and not about the patients that we're here to serve? I think that are they going to understand why we don't want to do certain things or why we do certain things a certain way? Are they going to come in and say, stop doing that? Appointments have to go faster, get this stuff done. And they're like, we're a fear-free practice. This is what you're pushing doesn't line up with what we're trying to accomplish. It's not unusual for people to have those types of thoughts and experiences. I do think if you're coming in as a manager from outside, I would encourage you to maybe not jump in and make a splash as much as really lean into getting to know the people who are there, really getting familiar with the purpose and the mission of the practice and the values of the staff. So you don't have to have medical training to be able to support a team that is all about access to care, or that is all about ongoing education, or that's all about the highest standards of medicine. But you better know that they're all about those things. That's I think where we really get in trouble. And so you have to really lean into your relationship building and into your trust building. And then you have to be able to walk that line of saying, I am a student in the medical industry, and I am seasoned when it comes to operation and running a business. And so I am going to be confident about the things that I'm confident in, and I'm going to ask questions about the things that I don't know, and I'm not going to act like that's something to be ashamed of, and I'm not going to act like I'm embarrassed or that this is a failing on my part. This is me getting acclimated to the industry and understanding the team and what they need from me. And then I'd be very intentional about that approach. And that's how I try to get my feet under me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it does remind me of when I first took over as a practice manager. Essentially, the lead technician that we had at the time didn't seem too happy about it. And I remember having a conversation with him and being like, hey, can we have a moment to just talk? And we talked for a moment about it. And he was just like, yeah, well, like, I just don't understand because there's a lot of things from the medical aspect that you're not as familiar with. And I literally looked at him and was like, yeah, that's why I have you. Like, this is why we're going to be a team. And I basically had to tell him, like, I'm not going to pretend to know the things that I don't know. Like, this is going to be your department because you are the one who knows how to do these things. And you're the one that's going to train people. And you have an opportunity right now, you and I both do, to build a culture in which we empower the people to do the thing themselves, because that's what I truly want. I don't have a desire to learn how to draw blood and place catheters. In fact, that stuff kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety, which is great because you're going to be the one that's doing it. Yeah. And because I'm going to support you in that leadership. And really, it just took having that conversation together, because I think he was afraid about that. He was afraid of, like, what's going to happen now, And yeah. I think whenever we have that change, whenever you're a new manager in any clinic, regardless of whether you've got the medical training or not, you have to focus on building trust with your team. And that is an open and honest conversation about where your abilities lie, right? And I talk to my team all the time. My specialty doesn't lie in the veterinary medicine, the medicine part of it, but my specialty does lie in getting us to collaborate and working efficiently and getting us to communicate and communication with clients, because they knew I was great with the clients, right? Like getting them to do, the compliancy of things, but also getting an angry client to not be angry. So they saw where my skills were. But that's exactly it, is we were a team that was constantly utilizing our skills in the best way that we could, knowing who excelled where and, how we can use strengths and what weaknesses we have so that we can work together. I think that's all such a valuable part of that trust building piece. And I think it's totally doable and manageable. It just does take time and effort.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, one of the lessons I learned in running a team and having turnover, right? Because you're going to have turnover. Young Andy would have turnover and somebody would leave, and I would think to myself, I need to replace that person. And I have never successfully replaced a person. Everyone that I have brought in after someone else has been different, like significantly different. Yeah. And they have different skills and different interests. And I think that's why turnover is so hard. People are not widgets you can pop out and pop in. Everyone around them has to adjust to the new person. It is not just the person is gone and then replaced. This is a different team than the one that you had before. Especially, now it might not be that big a deal if you say, well, we have this person that, ran the copy machine and we've swapped them out for, someone else who's now doing that. You go, well, that's not a big deal. But if you have someone who has a significant impact on how the practice runs, whether they're a technician, whether they're a doctor, the whole dynamic changes. If you've ever been in a practice and one of the vets left and a new vet came in, you've probably had the experience of the new vet is wonderful. They're just not the old vet. And now everything feels a little bit different. Very quickly you acclimate to that. But I just think that that's really important. And so I think a lot of people have a manager or have had a manager who came up and they were a technician and they had a strong medical background. And to your point, they were used to tapping that person and getting them to help on the floor if needed. Well, now you're going with a whole different player on your team. They have different skills. They're not going to get tapped to come in. What that's going to mean is the medical director is going to have to make adjustments, and your technicians are going to have to make adjustments, and your associate vets might have to get more collaborative with management, and they might have to be able to articulate why they want what they want and have some patience as we kind of work through things. And you might have to actually justify the things that you want to have happen. And if you have a good reason, you should be able to do that. So it's just different. But I think a lot of times this is the way it's always been. The manager has always had these skills and now they don't. And that seems wrong. It's like, well, sometimes it's time for a change. But the big thing is you can't try to consolidate the change to just the manager role. You have to understand that your team is changing and you have to be able to make that adjustment. So anyway, that's all I got for Headspace. How about you?
I think that's all I got for Headspace.
Let's take a break and then we'll do some action steps.
Oh.
All right. We are back. Again, we didn't get a lot of detail on this. I have a ton of action steps. I think my big thing was, the first thing you got to do is you need to do an audit of your job description. Because if you've got a job description that says, it's based off the old practice manager who would help out on the floor or whatever, you need to decide, is that medical involvement, is that really necessary and required for this job? And if you're like, actually, yes, then you should stick to that. If it's not required for this job, and I think most people are probably going to be in that, well, yeah, no, I don't need my manager on the floor, then great. Then you need to go and look at the job description and make adjustments. And honestly, I will tell you this, the number of people who are medically trained for veterinary medicine and also who have experience as managers of hospitals, buddy, you're fishing in a tiny little pond. Like that is a small pond. If you can open that job description up to be for a true small business manager, yours got a much bigger applicant pool. Now, you're going to have to invest your time and your energy into growing and developing this person from a business manager to a veterinary clinic or clinic manager. But I kind of enjoy that. I mean, I like mentoring. I like developing people, Be patient, invest in somebody that you think is going to be good and grow them. I think that there's a lot of upsides to that, but it starts with, you need to really look at this job description and then convince me this person needs a medical background.
I had the first action step as very similar, being, ask yourself why this seems to be such an issue. Because I think we're going to really get down to the problem. And I kind of covered that already. And the second step was certainly looking at the job description itself for the practice manager for your clinic. Because if we're talking about a small practice that's like a single doctor practice where your practice manager is truly also half practice manager, half veterinary technician, then yeah, maybe in your practice it is required. Most commonly, you will find that it's not needed. Even in a single doctor practice, I was a full-time practice manager, and it led to a lot of our growth and a lot of our success. And so I think it's important to look at that. If you need help, I think VHMA does a really great job of distinguishing the jobs between practice manager, hospital administrator, and office manager. A lot of times we think office manager is the practice manager, when in reality, it's not true. Most office managers are part-time, and then they're part-time receptionists. And so really, I think if you need a resource for something, I think they do a really great job of separating those three and laying out the time commitments of each role and kind of what they oversee. So it kind of give you a good idea of like, is my practice manager, are we large enough that our practice manager does need to be full-time? And if so, like, are they taking care of these things? You might also find there's a lot of things that aren't being done that should be being done, like perhaps having one-on-ones with your team. All of that you're only going to find out if you take a moment to look at the job description and really put this person where they need to be at.
Oh, yeah. I would also say, so action step for me, if you're bringing somebody in and they're going to be a manager and you want to grow them and develop them into a veterinary leader specifically, there's this little program called Uncharted Veterinary Conference that is a subscription service, and you can get them in there. They can check out our Leadership Essentials certificate if they want to, or just say, hey, here is a community. All of these people are vet leaders. They talk about vet practice management all day long. It is all about the issues that come up with staffing and leadership and management and clients in the vet world. And so now you're taking somebody who's got some chops in management, who's got some experience, and you're putting them with a community of other people who are running hospitals all over the world, and they're usually specifically vet hospitals. And so it's a place that they can ask some questions and kick around, what are the differences here, and why is this way, and why is your hospital set up that way? And you can ask those questions by a very well-informed, educated, and supportive group. That's going to help you learn and develop. And so, yeah, you can kind of take that whole developmental part that we were talking about, and you can give that to me and Maria if you want. We would do that for you.
Yeah, that's a great action item. I love that. A follow-up on that is, once you do the fivefold why and figure out exactly what the real problem is here, you can submit that in as a mailbag with just a tad more detail.
100%.
And we'll attack it from there and see what's going on. And maybe there's something else we're not looking at that we should be looking at.
The last part for me on this, and also is just the last action step for me, is you need to take a look at how your medical decisions get made in your hospital.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of like the job description, but not really. If you're going to have a manager that's sort of non-medically trained, what tweaks do we need to make, or how can we formalize our system for changing medical protocols, for adding new products? What does that system look like? Just so that there's clarity. I think that's one of the things that I didn't learn till later in my career. I don't believe you have to have a written protocol for everything. I don't think your practice life should be a rule book. I don't think you should go through your day following an algorithm. I don't. But there is so much benefit in just being upfront and saying, all right, guys, when we need to make a decision about adding new products, how does that happen? Who needs to be in the room? How much buy-in do we need from the doctors? Like, help me get my head around this. What's that going to look like? And the answer might be, well, we'll figure it out the next time we decide to add a product, and then we'll work together, and then we'll sort of create our protocol. I find that most protocols get created as you're going through the process, but anyway, I think that's probably a big piece of it is what are the medical decision protocols? And if they're not going to the manager, where are they going? If they are going to go to the manager, then that's a little SOP that we probably need to add about how much access are you going to have to the medical director? What's appropriate? When do you reach out? When are you going to discuss this? How do you get these decisions made? And so anyway, that's pretty much what I got for action steps.
Yeah, that's all I have. It's,
awesome.
Like I said, five words, so and 31 minutes to solve it.
I know, yeah. They were good. There were 5 good words. It was
great words. It made for literally my favorite podcast so far. Not because I'm in it or anything.
That's 100% why you said that.
No.
You like every podcast you're in more than the previous podcast that you were in.
Oh,
no. The most
No.
recent podcast you were in is your favorite. All right.
This is now my favorite.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.
And that's it. That's what I got. Guys, thanks for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I mentioned before, if you have not checked out the Uncharted community, check out unchartedvet.com. We got a lot of stuff going on. We have our Leadership Essentials Certificate, which is 8 hours of RACE CE. It is the absolute essentials that I believe everyone who's leading a veterinary team should have. And I made that with Stephanie Goss, and it is lovely. It lives over on Vetfolio with the NAVC team, but all of our members get free access to it. We also have our Conflict Management Certificate, which is fantastic for anybody in vet medicine who's never had any conflict management training, especially if you're averse to conflict, you don't like it, you shy away from it, or if you've got somebody who's come into the profession, they've come into the practice, and they're maybe liking conflict a little bit too much. And we're like, hey, let's get this person some tools to figure out other ways to approach these situations. We got you covered. It's 4 hours, RACE CE approved. It's a really, really good program. Guys, both of those are free to our members. Check out unchartedvet.com and learn more. Gang, that's it. That's all I got. Take care of yourselves. Bye.